Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Florida Sound Archive podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Kaiser, and for today's episode, I have on with me a very special guest. I have on Mark McHone. He is a musician out of the Jacksonville, Florida area. Mark, welcome in. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing, Jeff?
I'm doing fantastic. It's great
Good,
to have
good.
you on the podcast. Uh,
Awesome.
I'm
Thanks for
very
having me.
I'm very thankful that you took the time to send me the list of bands you've been in because I lost count after about 15. So you've been in a lot of
Yeah,
bands.
yeah. It it took me a minute. I don't think that's all of them. I don't know. So who knows? It's been a journey, man. That's for sure. So
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do that because you have played in a lot of bands over the years, and it's great to have you on the podcast to talk about the history of a lot of the bands you've been in, all your contributions to the Jacksonville music scene, and also perhaps some other areas that you had a chance to play in over the years too. So, you ready to get started?
yes, sir.
All right, let's do it. So, I want to kind of go back to your early beginnings, thinking back to growing up. So, I know you are born and raised in Jacksonville. So, perhaps tell the
hmm
listeners, tell the viewers out there about your early beginnings. Where'd you grow up and where'd you go to school and that sort of thing?
Um, so I've grown up in the south side of Jacksonville pretty much most of my life. Um, since '84 when I was born. Um, Basically, the way I got into music was from my parents and old rock and roll. It's like the Doors, Black Sabbath, the Beatles, things like that. And then my brother was like a metalhead punk rocker. He's like 9, 10 years older than me. So I used to go see him play in the early '90s with his band. I think they were called Technicolor Yawn, and there was one called Butter, and he sang in them. So I was that was kind of my introduction to that entire thing. And then seeing Metallica on MTV in the late '80s was really cool, but that helped a lot. But yeah, that influenced me. I always wanted to play music after seeing everybody play and having a good time and being introduced to that whole scene. Um, yeah, so that's pretty much a wrap of that one.
Yeah. And when you were going to school, whether it was your more formidable years, middle school, high school, what were you listening to back then? And perhaps were you hanging around other kids that had an influence on you musically?
It was more my brother. I just kind of took his music in elementary, like fourth or fifth grade around that time. I was listening to Propagandhi and stuff, Minor Threat, and like the Offspring Smash album just came out. Man, I feel old. Green Day and things like that are on TV. I think Weezer just started blowing up at the time. Yeah, that's how long ago that was. The Blue Album, Henry Rollins and Black Flag and all that kind of stuff. So I was blasting it every morning in elementary school.
And when you'd come home, what did your parents think about what you were listening to?
They never really said too much about it, which is kind of cool. So
Yeah, that's not a bad thing, actually.
yeah, they
So,
never really got onto us about that. So
you remember your first concert and where that was and who perhaps you saw?
my first local concert was probably '91 or '92. I was 7 or 8 years old, seeing my brother play. I don't know where that was. I don't know if the building's still around. I can't remember. My first real one was in 1997 with Suicidal Tendencies and Ringworm at the old Milk Bar. So my brother got my parents to let me go, and everybody was a giant back then. And I think they sold like dollar red stripes in the glass bottle that night for some reason. And you can only imagine how that went. So it was
Right.
pretty terrifying at first, but it was pretty awesome at the same time.
Well,
So
yeah, I mean, a suicidal hit is pretty
yeah,
intense. So, you being so young, what did you think of that?
I thought I was gonna die. I'm not gonna lie, but I never forgot it, man. It's a pretty legendary moment in my life. So got to meet Mike Muir from Suicidal. He came down and talked to us, hooked us up on merch and all kinds of stuff. So
Nice. That's
super
pretty
cool.
cool. Yeah. So, did that help give you another boost in terms of you perhaps looking to do music yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think 2 months later, my parents got me a bass. They put on layaway, and I started playing the band at school, playing bass. So I ended up joining jazz bands and all kinds of stuff later on. but I always just wanted to play rock and roll. So I just learned that stuff to play music and learn, but my passion was rock and roll. So
Who were some of the early influences that you had that you perhaps looked at and said to yourself, I kind of would like to do what they do or emulate that a little bit?
yeah, bass wise, I was always a big fan of 88 Fingers of Louie growing up. I know he's in Rise Against now, bass player, and then I like Peanut from 311. I'm trying to think. Fat Mike's always a really good bass player. He's got awesome lines. Face to Face, Scott Shiflett, Matt Riddle. I think Scott Shiflett's the only bass player still in it. But yeah, I'm trying to think. A lot of ska bands. I really enjoyed the Specials and Skank and Pickle, things like that, and that's really bringing it back. But yeah, that's off the top of my head. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are pretty solid bands, and especially I think about some of the labels back then, and some that still exist, of course, like Fat Wreck and
Mm-hmm.
Hopeless and Asian Man, and a lot of those bands that were putting out some great stuff. So, did you find that you started going to more shows like that as you were getting older?
Yes. Um, I think the second show I went to was Voodoo Glow Skulls, Union 13, and who else? Shelter. So it's pretty cool seeing that growing up. And then I just kept going. I saw MU330, the ska scene started coming back up. I saw Ska Against Racism Fest at Skate World down the street.
Oh,
And I think
nice.
Les and Jake headlined, and I think Hepcat was there, and I don't know. It was so long ago. Five Iron Frenzy, this whole Japanese ska band called Kamirai.
I remember
So
them.
yeah, they were great. Um,
Did you know at that point that bands like Less Than Jake were from Florida and perhaps in Gainesville?
I think I don't know. I had the Losing Streak tape, and I think I still have that tape actually. But I think I got it for like $7 somewhere, and I wore that thing out. So, but I don't know. I didn't know if they were from Florida or not. I don't think I really got into that too much back then. It was hard to find information on bands back then.
Right.
So
That's true. Right. The internet was still fairly coming
yeah,
along and it was still fairly new. So, when did you start to realize that there was a scene going on and you became more aware of what was happening around it?
probably around like 2000, 2001. That's when I really started going to tons of shows, being involved in whatever I was playing that we considered good at the time. So being in a young mindset, stubborn in ways. But yeah, I just always kind of went with what was good to me, honestly, and what had a like a powerful stance, I guess you could say. So
And I know depending on the different places you can go see a show, not every show could have been all ages too. So were you finding that some of the shows you wanted to go to, you could get in no problem, or did you run into situations where perhaps you couldn't get in because of your age?
strangely enough, it wasn't really too much of an issue. Um, I think there was one show I tried to go see us the Nobodies at the beach a long time ago, and they weren't letting me. They weren't having it. They weren't letting me in. So I think that's the only time I've ever had any problems. Usually they're pretty considerate about it. They put big X's on your hands, and
Right.
there you go.
That's
So
good. Yeah, yeah, totally.
yeah.
So as you're starting to think about perhaps doing music yourself, what do you remember about the first band you were playing with or
Oh
for?
man, that I performed with. Well, my first band was with just a bunch of old friends, and we were terrible. We just banged on the drums and screamed and argued in the garage, our parents' garage. I guess that's what you're supposed to do. I don't know. I don't know how anybody does anymore. I guess that's what we did. And we finally got into an art school here called Douglas Anderson, and I met my buddy Finn Lavelle, who played trombone for Against All Authority, guitar for Summer Obsession, and several bands. He's produced a lot of stuff. Um, so he just kind of started playing guitar at that time, and we had, I think our first name was called the Outlets. We had a whole horn section, everything, and yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to do when I got to the art school. I wanted to find somebody who could play music. So thankfully that worked out, and we just kept going from there for quite some time.
Were you playing at like house parties? Did you play at
Yeah,
venues? Like, what was that like?
yeah. My first show, I still remember the date. It's October 30th, 1999, and we showed up to this party. It was a Halloween party. It was a bunch of older people. There was like a bunch of it was like a giant goth party of some sort. We just showed up to, and they're like, "Hey, you guys!" A whole band was there, and they're like, "Hey, you want to play?" And I was like terrified. I was like, "Oh my god, I gotta play in front of all these people. This is gonna be horrible." I had my notes. I was like staring at my notes with all the songs I wrote down on a piece of paper, and it was just a bunch of crazy goth people watching a ska band first show. And then I think afterwards, like there was some goth band came out. They had like smoke, and they're all like decrepit and coffins, and I don't know. It was a very odd show. It was my first time, but we just kind of, as young kids, we just really tried to push everything we could get our hands on. So we played backyards, abandoned casinos up in Georgia, all kinds of things, man. I can barely list it. I think we even started our own venue in Mayport called ODB at one time. It's called Old Dirty Building, and we
That's
built our own
clever.
stage. Yeah, yeah, we built our own stage. Like a bunch of us that had bands, they wouldn't let us play at certain places because of our age, so we kind of built our own thing. Fortunately, got shut down because we didn't have permits, but we got away with some cool shows, man. So yeah.
And you mentioned you were practicing at home. So at what point did you make the transition to do more practicing at perhaps like a warehouse or something to that effect?
Um, I honestly, I played at home for a practice camp almost every day of my life for a very long time. Um, I I still learn, I still practice. 40 years old, I still do that. It's impossible to learn everything in this lifetime, unfortunately. So I always try to find something new, and that's how I was back then. Also, if I get bored with that, I try to find something else, and get bored with that, just keep going, try to progress.
Right. So when you were creating music that you were looking to record, were you
Mhm.
doing this at people's homes or were you venturing out to a local studio, whether it be in Jacksonville or in a surrounding area?
Yeah. When we first started doing it, we had like a really terrible 4 track. Yeah, that's how long ago that was. And we just kind of went with a tape and just record everything we had to get the best sound of what we had available at the time. And then we went to some place called August Studios in '99, and it wasn't a good experience. It's no longer around. It was a long time ago. So my first recording experience, we're recording, we're all excited, we got our money, and the guys just literally fell asleep. We couldn't wake them up. So that was my first experience with
Was
the
it his
recording equipment.
studio?
Yeah, yeah. He just passed out, and I was like, oh, so this is cool. And then we started recording at Hole of the Pigeon after that with Paul Lipinski and Jay Peel. And Inspection 12 recorded there, all the old Yellow Card stuff. A lot of bands came through there, Evergreen Terrace, everything. So tons of stuff, man,
Right.
coming out of there. So
Absolutely. And thinking about some of those bands that you may have mentioned, like a Yellow Card or Inspection 12. I mean, those two bands in particular definitely are more known in terms of what was going on in the scene in
yeah,
Jacksonville at that time. So were those bands that you got a chance to see early on when they were just pretty much getting started?
yeah. I saw Inspection 12 a lot. I even opened up for them in 2001 sometime with my band Negative 121, and we were called Soapbox 7. Um, some people remember that. It was a very long time ago. But we opened up for I-12, and I think Last Chance opened up for Yellow Card when Ryan Key just joined. And there was a place called Fuel Coffee House. And they had a bunch of school desks and whatever you could sit in. It was just like an old cafe. We all played together. So that's kind of my earliest memories of all that stuff.
And in terms of the crowds back then and just the people who were the ones coming to the shows most often, how would you describe the scene in terms of the people who were coming out to a lot of these shows?
Um, Back then it was kind of sparse. You had to really, really advertise. Um, but overall, it was pretty good. But you had to be consistent. And even when you're consistent, it was just kind of like up and down. It was like, hey, there's 4 people at this show, and then there's 200 suddenly this night, and then there's 3 people here maybe, and then it'll be like 500 one day. It was just very sparse. Jacksonville's a very big area, and that's a hard thing to get through. So
What would you say was one of the biggest differences between playing a show maybe in the city or in the county or playing it near the beach?
The beach has a really good scene. Um, I've always enjoyed that. Like I played Lynch's for about this place called Lynch's for about 5 years every Monday, and I always felt like people always come out to those shows. But when you get deeper in the city, there's not a whole lot going on downtown here. So when you play a place, you gotta really push it, and it can be like a Wednesday night. Jacksonville's kind of a working city, so it's hard to get through to people on the weekdays. It's it's like you're playing four different cities sometimes.
I can imagine that. And because where Jacksonville's located, being so north, uh, you have opportunity perhaps go other places, right? Perhaps whether it be Georgia or even go south like Daytona or even
Mhm.
even even venturing off in some other parts of the state. So talk about that for a minute. At what point did you start to discover some other areas and maybe venture out a little bit more outside of Jacksonville?
Um, Probably when I was like around 16, 17, we started really traveling to like Kingsland and Daytona, St. Augustine, wherever we could go and play these little towns. I don't even know the names anymore. It's been so long. But I really started branching out around 18 when I was with the band Greyfield. The day after I graduated high school, we drove to Connecticut. So to be on a tour, just to get out. And that was my first time really getting out of the state and feeling, like I'm actually doing something with music. So it was a cool feeling, man.
Sure.
We were very young to be on the road. So
What did your family think about that first tour and you being able to go
um,
outside the state?
mom wasn't too happy. They're always like, "You're doing what? Like you're getting into this RV with all these guys, and you guys are just going to drive around, and what are you going to do with that? That doesn't make any sense to them." So
Right.
yeah, that's basically what we did.
Any
But yeah,
memorable road stories from that first tour?
oh man, let me think here. Well, the cool thing about that tour is we kind of had our own tour at first. We booked strictly just through phone and online or whatever email address we had at the time. And crazy enough, we ended up getting on tour with Goldfinger that same time. And it was Story of the Year also. They were just coming up. They're called Big Blue Monkey at the time. And our first show, we go from like playing to like 20, 30 people or whatever to like 1,000 to 2,000, maybe more all of a sudden. And my first show with that was at the 930 Club in DC. And so I remember the 930 Club for the Minor Threat videos, and I remember we were watching the Minor Threat videos on the way there, just be like, we're playing there. And I was so nervous, dude. It was it was an experience. It was really cool. So
I think the 930 Club had two different periods. I think there was one
yeah,
location that it moved to a different location as far as I
a
can
bigger one.
remember. But
Yeah, much bigger.
yeah, absolutely. So that's pretty neat. And then you mentioned that you had gone down to like Daytona, St. Augustine. What were the scenes like there from what you can remember?
They were good. I remember there was a lot more people than Jacksonville at the time coming out. We used to play St. Augustine, this place called Riptides, I think, with Boredom, and long time ago. So I was probably 16 or 17 when we did that. But I can't remember where we played in Daytona. I can't remember. I don't know. I just remember like playing on the floor. That's all I kind of remember. So
In other words, there was no stage.
no stage. No.
Okay.
Maybe like two speakers, some drunk guy that lives there. I don't know, set up or whoever.
During all these different places you would go to, even in Jacksonville itself, did you ever play at someone's house, whether it was a backyard or in their living room or anything like that ever happen?
Constantly, constantly. I was like 17. We were playing in. I was in negative 121, and it was like some girl's birthday party. She's like, "Please come play my birthday party." We're like, "All right, we'll do it." Show up. It's mass amounts of kids and like no parents, nothing, nobody guiding anything. We start playing, and somebody got thrown through the drywall. I just remember this big hole in the living room, and we just kept going. We did not stop. And then the parents showed up towards the end, and I just remember them screaming, and we just kept going, and we just packed up and drove off. So that was a memorable day for me. So
I would
Yeah.
say that not something that happens every day.
No, no. So it was a pretty cool feeling back then, being that young and doing stuff like that. It's not something everybody gets to experience,
Right. And that's
unfortunately.
the best time to explore those types of things
Oh
is when
yeah.
you are
Oh
that
yeah.
young. And especially back then too, I feel like too, it's a different time. We're talking like early 2000s, which to me always felt like just an extension of the late 90s.
Oh
And
yeah.
so different time for sure. Now, I know there's other venues and things like that around Jacksonville that perhaps maybe you had not had the chance yet to play at, but you were hopeful to. What other places were out there that you had on your radar that you were like, it'd be pretty cool to play there at some point?
Um, I've always wanted to play Red Rocks amphitheater. That's a legendary place. I remember seeing the old Sunday Bloody Sunday YouTube video. I always thought I love that. I don't like all YouTube, but that YouTube was cool. I'm sure some people understand that, but before Bono got all strange. But I'm trying to think. I played a lot of the venues I wanted to play. I always wanted to play CBGBs. I never got to play there. All my other friends have. But I got to play with my Nirvana tribute band. I got to play House of Blues in New Orleans, and that was a really cool experience. So,
That is
but
pretty cool.
overall, I've played most of the places I've always wanted to play, besides those two.
Right. And I do want to get a little bit more into that in just a moment, but you mentioned the Nirvana tribute band that you do as well.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that just for a moment. Now, what exactly brought that on to want to do something like a Nirvana tribute band?
So my longtime friend Adam Latif, he played in Paul Mud for 5 or 6 years, I believe, and he had that band probably 8 or 9 years before he even contacted me about it. I ran into him at a bar one day, and he called me like 2 days later. He's like, "Hey man, you want to come jam with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course." So I've been doing that for it'll be 9.5 years. I've been in that band. So it's people think Nirvana is easy to play. It's not. Especially when you're playing like 30 something songs in 2 hours. And it's also enduring. It's very endurance. I feel like I'll lose 5 pounds every time I get done with our set. And I always feel bad for the drummer that we have that's playing that, because Dave Grohl's a beast.
I mean, that's why he always play with his shirt off. I mean,
Yeah, it's no joke, man.
what do you think
But
is the
yeah,
most what do you think is the most rewarding part about playing in a tribute band like that?
um, to be honest with you, it definitely is an easy. It's not an easy gig, but it pays the bills. It's a good paycheck just to play some covers, have a good time, and play these really nice venues. Um, Plus I get to hang with my friends, and we get to play some like people don't consider Nirvana punk rock, but it is punk rock. They're a punk rock band. They got lucky. So, um, yeah, it's just cool to be play aggressive songs, and we always play Teen Spirit last, because I honestly hate playing that song. I'm so sick of it. I played it in every cover, every tribute band I've ever been in or whatever. So everybody's like, play Teen Spirit. I can tell people are waiting for that moment, but we always play it last to make sure they sit and wait and listen to all the rest of the songs. So, but yeah, but overall, it's a cool experience, man. We get to travel a lot and
Right.
hang out.
Well, I'm sure it opens the opportunities, perhaps the things that maybe you don't always get a chance to do by playing in an original band, right? You get a
Yeah,
chance to maybe do perhaps some other things. And just kind of going back to the venues also for a moment, you mentioned one of the places you would have loved to played, but of course that ship has sailed with CBGBs. So I want you to
yeah.
think about in terms of Jacksonville, what venue would you say has been like that CBGBs of the area? Does any particular
Um,
venue stand
the
out to
old,
you?
yeah, the old Milk Bar used to be like that. Everybody played there, like everybody that came up always played there. Late '90s, early 2000s, mid '90s, um, early '90s, I think too. Jackrabbits has been around for a really, really long time around here. 99 or 98. I started playing there in 99. And I think that's the longest running venue in this area. They're still going. So same spot, same place. No smoking, finally. But sometimes the AC wouldn't work and there's just smoking. I think I saw Cannibal Corpse there and like Black Dahlia Murder. And AC went completely out. It was just people shoved in there just smoking cigarettes. It was a sight to be seen, that's for sure. So. But yeah.
I can imagine for sure. And you know, that many people and a lot of metalheads, I imagine, in there, and just
It was an experience.
I bet it was. And I want to
Yeah.
go back to the Milk Bar for a moment there. I know there's been a
Mhm.
lot of different shows there. So do you remember like one of your first early experiences at the Milk Bar, like maybe who you saw in that first or maybe even second time you were there?
Yes. Um, I mentioned earlier it was Suicidal Tendencies. That was that show. And Big Blow Skulls, and I saw U.S. Bombs there. Hung out with Dwayne Peters. I don't know what's going on with him recently, but and then we MU 330 and Strung Out. I saw Blink 182 there with Les and Jake and Unwritten Law. I think I was in ninth grade. So and crazy enough, they kind of reopened it to put Strung Out on recently. It came here last month. So it's called the Real Teen Cafe, and it was kind of I haven't been in that building in 25 years, so it was really cool to kind of experience that again.
What was the biggest difference in terms of going back, in terms of like the aesthetics and all that? What was that like for you?
Well, there was an AC that was good, and then the age, man. Everybody's getting older. It's kind of crazy to see, but it's cool at the same time. But it didn't stop people from going absolutely wild when Strung Out came on. So that was a pretty cool thing to see.
Were there any shows that came to the Milk Bar that perhaps you really wanted to be there, but for whatever reason you couldn't make it? Anyone stand out to you?
When 88 Fingers Louie first came here, I think I had to go to North Carolina with my mom. No big deal, but at the same time, I was like, man, that was my favorite band at the time. Crazy story about that. I ended up touring with them around 2018, 2019 in Canada with a band called Sled. And that was the whole Bird Attack Records thing I was under for a little bit. And Belvedere was on that tour too. So it was Such Gold was there. Yeah, it was really cool, man. It was a crazy experience.
Yeah. I mean, it had
Yeah,
to have been. I mean, especially too, you mentioned they were one of those bands that had a big influence on you.
yeah, yeah,
So to get a chance to do that tour with
yeah,
them, I'm sure was a pretty rewarding experience.
yeah, definitely. It's kind of crazy. I think I was in Toronto at the Velvet Underground, and the guitar player of 88, he's like, "Hey man, you got any picks I can use?" I'm like, "Yeah, here." And I was like, "Man, that just happened. This is crazy." I guess like when you focus on something for so long, it will eventually happen. So
There you
the back of
go.
your mind. Yeah.
Right. Now, was that the first time you traveled to play a show outside of the US?
Yeah, yeah. Canadian border it's in professional terms difficult. So that was my first time crossing a border like that, and it was not enjoyable. I don't recommend it. If anybody's done it, that's from America or vice versa. Just don't do it. So yeah, man.
Did you guys play other cities in Canada? And if so, what other
Yeah.
locations did you play?
Um. Well, we stayed in Montreal. What's up? Ontario, Ottawa, and then this place called Saint Hyacinth. I think I'm saying it right. I can never say it right. Hyancith, Saint Hyacinth, I guess. It was kind of like they had a warehouse in the middle of a farm, and the guys built the stage and the sound system, and it was probably like eight, two locals, us, and Such Gold, Belvedere, 80 Fingers Louie. I can't remember who else played, but yeah, it was like a kind of a festival type deal, and the whole place kind of smelled like cow manure. But it was a cool experience, man. I mean, it was like they just put this warehouse out just for the show. So,
For
and
you,
then
what would you say was the difference between playing like a show at a smaller place and playing at like a festival?
especially in another country, it's different because you're just like it's definitely a different attitude. Um, some people speak English, some people don't. It's a big mix of people, and some of these people actually live in the farm area, and it's like their time to get out. They just lose their minds, bring their kids, their family, you know, and kids are jumping off the stage. Like, it's awesome, man. It was cool, but I don't know. Being here from Florida is just kind of like a home, and I kind of show up and I'm like, hey, I'm playing here again. Good to see you. Over there, I'm like, what's gonna happen?
Right.
That's the excitement of it. So
That's true. That's
yeah,
true. I mean, it almost feels like almost too like a vacation in in some kind of weird way. It can feel that way
yeah,
too at times, but yeah,
yeah.
and kind of thinking back to home, one of the other venues you mentioned was Jackrabbits and how they've been
Hmm.
around for the longest tenure now in terms of those places that still exist. What do you think has been their secret to maintain that for as long as they've been able to?
Man, I guess just sticking with it. I don't really know how to explain it. So many venues have come and gone, and somehow that place is still standing. And I don't know, they just keep having shows, and they've always kind of done the same thing and pushed, just having musicians there constantly. So I mean, it's just I guess perseverance. I guess that's a simple term for it.
Right. And with these different venues that you mentioned, and we've talked about some of the bands that you were going to go see, who perhaps were the out of towners, right? The bands that may have been coming in from other
Mhm.
locations. What were some of the local bands that you were making a point to go see, whether it was in the early 2000s or even later on? Who were
Mhm.
some of those other bands that you were a fan of yourself that you were excited to go see play?
Man, let's bring it back. I'm trying to think. Let me think the bands. Um, I would always go see Evergreen Terrace. I remember the first time I saw them, we played some anti-racism fest at Fuel Coffee House, and I never heard that style of, hardcore at the time, kind of like melodic hardcore. And it was just wild, it was just people beating the living crap out of each other. So I'm trying to think, man. There was a band called Happy Hour around town. There was kind of a ska band. I don't know if you remember that or not, but they
I
were pretty
do.
good. I used to play and see Hat Trick all the time. I'm trying to think. My buddies from Holy Bread, my buddy Aaron Abraham, and all those guys. I've seen them for years. I went to high school with all them from the same
I
area.
think like Happy Hour and Hat Trick, I think they all recorded too at Pigeonhole, right?
Absolutely, same studio. Yep. Just trying to think, man. I used to see this kind of hip hop band called QST that was around town. They were really good. It's just so many. It's hard to. Lurch and the Vicious Hick, Shadow Agency, and I don't know. It's so many like that we're
Right.
playing here around the time.
And that's
So
great. I mean, that's great that, there were so many to help create that scene, right? And
yeah.
I imagine a lot of these different bills were a mix of whether it was ska or punk or
Oh yeah.
whatever else in between. And I imagine it was a
Yeah.
pretty good
I
mix.
remember when new metal mix started coming in, and that was always interesting. So it's like angry rednecks getting on stage and yelling at people about whatever. But
Did you
I,
get into that style as well?
not entirely. I've kind of played in bands that are similar to that style, but I never really got hard into it. I mean, I like some old Corn and things like that, but I'm not a Disturbed guy. I call Disturbed zoo metal. I don't know, but I don't know. People love it. It's okay if you do. I just always kind of found a lot of that stuff to be kind of cheesy in ways. It's just kind of synthetic. So
And I feel like too
just my opinion.
I feel like a lot of the new metal in a way was very bass heavy.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so and you being a bass player, did you at any point ever think, well, perhaps maybe trying out a different instrument, or were you always pretty much playing the bass and that was what you were comfortable with?
For a while, I just played bass in bands. I became a music teacher later on, and I started learning. I learned the drums, I learned guitar, I started really learning piano. I kind of had a brief, like pretty good understanding of what it was. I can read music and do all that. But when I started teaching, I actually got down to the basics and learned. Played drums at a band for a little bit called Bigley. They're still going. They're kind of like a reggae rock type band, which is Adam Latif also. He plays in that. And I've just played guitar on random recordings, and yeah,
So
always
you,
try to like
yeah, yeah,
expand what I can, so I don't
right.
get too bored. So
Absolutely. I mean, with a lot of bands you have been in, I mean, there's a pretty long list. So I imagine that you having that talent to play, you could easily be brought in to be a part of a
yeah,
project, even if it's just to go on a tour, which I
yeah,
believe you've done too, right?
yeah, several times. Um, well, there was a band called The Secret State around 2007 or 8. They were originally from Baltimore, and they came down to Jacksonville. So I guess start kind of new. And I went on tour with them, and we drove back up to Baltimore to play the headlining show. And then this was a rough drive. And we drove from Baltimore to Austin, Texas to do South by Southwest for 4 days. And then drove back to Jacksonville. So that was, I don't remember a lot of the drive because, those long drives are kind of, you space out. But yeah, it was cool. It was a cool experience, man. I got to do South by Southwest, and I love Austin. I almost moved there. I love that city.
Wow.
I think I gained 5 pounds when I was there, but
I mean, you have to eat. I mean, when you're on these
oh
tours,
man,
I imagine, you know?
barbecue is unimaginable there. It's amazing. So
That is
yeah,
true. So when you're doing these tours, right, it sounds like the more time that went on, you were expanding upon the different places you were going. So did you ever
yeah,
make it out west to,
yes.
let's say, California? Okay, you did. So where'd you go out there?
So I was in a band called Summer Obsession. They got signed to Virgin Records when I was in it. So that was another rough drive. It was with Chris Brown, Finn Lavelle, and Luke Walker, and they had a band called Trouble Lives before that, and it became Summer Obsession, or Start Trouble, and it became Summer Obsession. So when I joined, we took my minivan and we drove from Jacksonville to Los Angeles. So that's an interesting ride for
That's a
sure.
drive. You mentioned about going from Baltimore to Austin and going from Jacksonville to LA. That's no
Yeah,
joke.
that was bad. So those were probably the two worst ones I mentioned. So we got there, lived in Glendale, Los Angeles for a little bit. We stayed at extended stay Days Inn, and it was not updated from like 1987 probably. So yeah, I think the TV had 2 channels and the elevator didn't really work. We were kind of scraping by at the time because when we got there, like Virgin didn't really. They were switching over to like a whole new like staff. So everybody that we talked to before we got there, and it's 2005, so it wasn't like you're online and all these things happen. We get there and they're like, "Who are you?" So and we signed the deal and everything. So that was a whole nother ordeal. But I got to play up and down Sunset, which was really cool. I didn't get to do the Whiskey a Go Go, but I've been there. You have to pay to play there now, apparently. So that's what I've heard. Like
Wow.
all the bands that go there have to like basically pay to be in there, and they don't make money. And quick set, you're in and out. So it's kind of like a cash grab, I guess, over there a lot.
Interesting.
But we did the Playboy Mansion. That was a cool experience. We got to play there. Um, we pulled up in my minivan, and there's like a rock you talk to get in, and we drove straight up in this crappy Dodge Caravan. So it was cool, man. And I called all my friends. I was like, "You're not gonna believe where I'm at." We played because Start Trouble was on a video game, the Playboy Mansion video game, and we played their songs too. So they invited us out there to play that song, and it was an experience, man. It was really cool. Got to swim in the grotto and drink for free and
Nice.
all that stuff. So it was fun.
Yeah. Now, did Virgin ever give any kind of advance to the band, or what was that experience like?
I didn't see the advance. We kind of had a fallout out in LA, unfortunately. I mean, this is a long time ago. So me and Chris Brown, who played drums for Evergreen Terrace, we drove back in my minivan back to Jacksonville. I mean, I left with like a couple grand just to get back and whatever. But when a band kind of falls apart, it's like a business, it's like a marriage. You kind of have to start over again, and that's something you have to do a lot in music. So it was a hard time. I'm not gonna lie to you, but perseverance, like I said earlier. So
Right. No, that's true. And I totally agree with what you're saying regarding that relationship because you
yeah,
are with different people. Even if I've known you for 20 years, we grow, we evolve. We're going to
Hmm.
have differences, and we need to find ways to either work through them or
Yeah,
come
that's
up with
the
a better
hardest part,
solution.
I think. Not writing, not touring, not any of that. It's just finding a common ground and sticking with that common ground
Right.
for all those years. That's the miracle of that. So
Very true. Now, just mentioned the word writing, and I do want to talk a little bit about that too, because writing and playing could be a little bit different for some people in terms of what drives you. So, when you're thinking about writing music or maybe writing lyrics, whatever it may be, where are
mhm.
you drawing on from? Like, what's your biggest influence and inspiration on that front?
Basically, it's whatever surrounds me at the time. How I'm feeling, like when I write a riff or write a lyric, it's just what's going on in my head at the time. During COVID, I was writing a lot of weird stuff, like fever dream type rock and roll. It was really strange. So that was me and LP and Steve Miller had a band called It Exists during COVID. So we were writing all this like experimental kind of stuff. So it's always what surrounds me at the time and how I'm feeling and whatever's going on. So, but like if I'm trying to write angry stuff and I'm not angry, it's kind of difficult, you know. I don't know. You just it's hard to explain the creativity part.
Sure.
It's really about just what's around you at the time, in the present day.
One of the other bands that you've played in that I'm a bit more familiar with because I've been around for a while is Julia Gulia. So, can
Hmm.
you talk a little about that band, how you got brought in, and maybe
Yeah,
your
yeah.
experience with them?
So in 2008, 2008, me and this guy named Andy Jones, we played in a band called Mindslip together. We auditioned to be in that band. And they were kind of like a heavier, kind of new metalish, like off time, weird time signatures. It was a learning process. It's cool. But we weren't happy being in there. So we started our own band called In Whispers. And we got signed to Beeler Brothers at the time, and we got an NHL 11 video game. We did some pretty cool stuff, man. It was kind of like a Kill Switch Engage type sound we were going for. We played. We were the first metal band to play Rockville, the first one. I think at like 11 in the morning on the Jaeger stage. I think my feet were, or my shoes were melting on the stage when I was playing. But anyways, it was all black stage, sitting out for like 3 days in Jacksonville downtown. So that was one of the hottest I've ever played. But then we started doing the cover thing. We There wasn't really a whole lot going on in the rock and roll scene of covers that was really constant at the time. So we kind of just barged our way in there and played wherever we could for very small fee at the time. So over time, it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and we started getting better venues, consistent gigs, everything. So we did the cover thing, the original thing at the same time. The first cover band was called Dick Cheney and the Assassinators, and so we you know those old timey bar owners don't like that name, so we changed it to Julia Gulia, and rest is history from there. We did have a lot of good memories with them. We had a good time. Don't remember a whole lot, but it was a lot of fun. It was very busy. I felt like I was on tour constantly. You don't really get to take care of yourself too much, and you're never home. So it definitely takes a toll on you over time.
Where were some of the
So
places that you were playing with them that you can remember that stand out to you?
yeah, yeah. Lynch's. I remember the first time we played there, we exploded there. Like every night was line out the door. So that was really cool experience to kind of finally branch out. And then we started really getting into that scene at the Seawalk Pavilion, and we opened for Blue Oyster Cult and all kinds of bands. Really cool. I got to use the Blue Oyster Cult bass amp, and that was a cool experience. Got to meet him.
That's pretty interesting. I haven't had any guests come on yet who mentioned opening up for Blue Oyster Cult. So that's pretty
Yeah, that's a rare thing. I thought it was really cool. But yeah, we played bars like my place, your place. We've played every bar here, like many times. So when these bars weren't doing that great, they had smoking inside, and there's a bunch of angry, like four people in there telling us to shut up. And so
right.
I remember there was one time, you know, I was like, "Hey, are you guys tired? You all right?" And this guy goes, "Yeah, I'm exhausted." And I don't know what to say after that one. Like, all right, well, I guess we keep playing. I don't know. You get all kinds of stuff yelled at you when you do that type of scene. So,
Of course, absolutely.
yeah.
And you mentioned, there was a lot of covers, but also I believe Julia Gulia had some originals too, right?
Yeah. I played on the entire EP with them, the 4 songs. And then I left around the time we did the latest song. So, and then Stan Martell took over, which I've recorded with him a bunch. He's in Kingsland. He's done a lot of people. So, it's been doing it for a minute.
Did you have a particular favorite cover that you got the chance to perform with Julia Gulia on that you just seem to really enjoy?
We used to do Holy Diver from Dio, and we did the Kill Switch version. And that was always really cool to play. That's a fun one. We killed that song, so really enjoyed that one.
It's a classic, for sure.
Yeah,
Good one.
definitely.
Nice. And as you were talking and you were mentioning all these different places you were playing, and also too a lot of the different bands. Obviously, there's people who have to put these shows on, right? So, were you aware and who was helping to promote some of these shows? Like, who was involved behind the scenes to book a lot of these
Yeah,
bands, especially the local ones?
yeah. 2 that come to mind are Jason Lewis and Tim Hall. Tim Hall owns Jackrabbits. Jason Lewis always booked for the Milk Bar and Fuel, and I think the 2 of them have probably booked every band just about that can come through over the years. It's been a long time, but getting good with them when I was younger was like what you have to do. Like when you're young, trying to be out there, just be in good terms with the promoters, even if you don't get along with them. Just do it. Shut your mouth, play the show. Later on, it will pay off. So yeah, but overall, man, I know Tim Hall's still doing it. I don't know if Jason still really books too much anymore, but Tim Hall's still running Jackrabbits.
Nice, right. And that's really great to hear that story about how influential that those two gentlemen were at
Yeah,
bringing those bands to Jacksonville, because being in Florida, it's not uncommon for bands to either not come down there as often because, but thankfully Jacksonville is on the upper north,
yeah.
so it's more
It's it's
accessible.
it's not easy to tour here. It's not easy to tour in Florida. It's you can't just like go over to the next state. It's either go all the way down or all the way up. You're stuck. So when people tour Florida, they tour multiple cities for that reason.
Exactly. And speaking about touring multiple cities in Florida, I know we mentioned some cities, but Florida being obviously a massive state, there's other places to play: Tampa, Orlando,
Yeah.
we have Palm Beach, we have Fort Lauderdale, we have Miami, and then the
Oh
whole
yeah.
west side, and even the middle of the state. So, thinking about the state as a whole, what other places in Florida did you get a chance to play shows, or maybe even you went
Yeah.
for a show to just see a band play?
Played the Social a lot in Orlando. That's a great venue. I've always loved playing there. My old band Good Fortune, we were drinking underage there and got in trouble. But they didn't do anything about it. They were just like, "What are you doing?" Yeah. So we were kind of nuts at the time. I think the craziest band I was in was that band. We just turned 21, 22, and we had a punk ska band that made no money. So we just traveled in a minivan.
How many
So
people? How many people were in that band? Good Fortune.
there was 3.
Okay.
We were kind of and then whoever wanted to ride with us at the time, we just our friends and all kinds of stuff. So that band opened up for a lot of people. Um, but I'll get into that. Another place, I'm thinking Orlando the Social is what sticks out for me mostly in Florida. That's a really fun venue. Played the State Theater in Tampa a couple times within Whispers. I think we toured with Edema, that new metal band. Those are good guys. They took us out, got us hotels every night and everything. So that was cool. Um, I've been to Churchill's. I never played there down in Miami. It's not there anymore, is it?
No, Churchill's unfortunately closed up shop, and
Oh wow.
yeah. So you had a chance to see who at Churchill's? You remember?
When Finn Lavelle, my old guitar player, he was playing trombone for Against All Authority. So I'd come hang out with them and go see them all the time. And I think it was like New Year's Eve of 2000. Went down there and drove. So it's a cool experience being that young and seeing a band you really enjoy.
Absolutely. And you got to check
Yeah.
that box off because that
Yeah.
place is gone. So,
Yeah. For
and
sure.
when you came back up, did you get a chance to play in any other locations in Florida that stand out to you?
Um, not a whole lot to stand out. I know that sounds crazy, but I mean, in Jacksonville, I played all those places. But you know, when you're from a place, you're like, okay, I'll play it. But if you're from somewhere else, you'll remember it better, I guess. But a lot of Florida shows I've played back in the day were just kind of like someone's house. I mean, I played Gainesville a bunch. We played at a High Dive when it was unfortunately just closed recently from a red.
Right.
It's a bummer. But
What was it like
I
what was it like playing in Gainesville? Because Gainesville is such a place synonymous with that very tight scene. You know, a lot of
oh
bands
yeah,
came from Gainesville. So what was it like playing there?
Gainesville's awesome to play. Everybody's very respectful and they always come out and have a good time. Um, crazy. The craziest response I got was from the tribute band there. So this guy, I played there and I returned, and this guy came up to me and he goes, "Is that High Dive?" He goes, "Man, last time I saw you, I broke my ribs." I was like, "Awesome!" Like that was my response, and I felt kind of bad afterwards. But I was like, "Thanks for coming back." So yeah, people go crazy over there. It's a good time.
Were there any bands that were from the Gainesville area that you were a fan of that perhaps you
Oh
bought a
yeah,
lot of their records? Like what bands come to mind?
Hot Water Music, Less Than Jake. Those are the two that I can think of. It's that band Asshole Parade. I don't even remember them. Yeah.
Right. There's a lot for sure, no doubt.
the
But
Usuals, I think they were called. The ska band back in the
yeah,
day.
ska band. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. That was way back.
Yes. So yeah, Gainesville, great scene. And what about the west coast of the state? Maybe like St. Pete, Clearwater. Did you ever venture on that side at all?
Yeah. Um, Tampa, St. Pete area. Done the State Theater. I just saw the Misfits and Megadeth last year. That was really cool. And Fear, Leaving's like 100 years old. So that was pretty cool. He's probably not 100, but damn, he's up there, man.
Yeah,
Um, I'm trying to think what else. I don't know. It's I haven't been there in a while. So
sure,
besides that,
sure. Well, it sounds like you did get a chance though to play a lot of different places in the state.
yeah.
A lot of the cities I think most people would probably play at. So,
Oh yeah.
uh,
We played. This is kind of a crazy story. We played in West Palm Beach. I was in good fortune, and I didn't get a whole lot of details about the show. They're just like, "Hey, it's a benefit. Come play." So we're being degenerates and drinking and all that stuff in the parking lot. And then I realized it's a Mothers Against Drunk Driving show, like a benefit. I was like, well, this is cool. So yeah, you can imagine how that went. Anyways, they paid us, and I was like, yeah, very awkward, to
I
say the
can
least.
imagine.
I don't know who put
Were
us
you
on a
invited
Mothers
back
Against
after
Drunk Driving.
that?
No, we were not. No,
Where was that? Do you remember what place that was?
I don't know. It was some big building in West Palm. I really don't know. I
Yeah,
couldn't tell you. This is probably 20 years ago, almost.
sure, sure.
Yeah.
I know there were a few places you could play off Clematis Street in downtown Palm Beach. I'm wondering if it perhaps was there, or maybe it was something else that perhaps was a
It was
bit
something
more
else.
off the
I can't
radar.
remember.
Yeah,
It was kind of churchy, kind of, it was just we didn't really necessarily fit in for all that scene at the time.
yeah.
We kind of had like a leftover crack sound. So yeah, you get it.
Were there any places perhaps that you were hopeful to tour, but maybe for whatever reason it didn't happen?
um Trying to think. I'd like to tour Europe. I've never been. So kind of hoping that will happen one day. I've been kind of talking to some other bands recently, and it's kind of they have it's these longtime bands, and they basically have somebody they have set. So if that set person does not work, then they will call me. So it's kind of one of those situations. But I'd love to be in Europe, man, and I'd love to tour Japan. I've always wanted to go there too,
Right.
just because of all the videos I've seen of American bands playing there. I'm like, man, that sounds awesome. So
Absolutely. And
yeah,
the admiration and reception it feels like from the fans out there, just from watching videos and you look at people's faces, it
yeah,
looks and feels so different when you're watching an American audience.
they are absolutely ecstatic over there. So yeah, over here it's kind of like we've seen that, and people enjoy it, they have fun,
Right.
but not like over there, man. They live it. They're waiting. So
Exactly.
you get warmed up. But yeah, man,
Well, hopefully that happens someday and you get a chance to do those. I imagine that would
for
be a
sure.
pretty wild ride to
Yeah.
do that. So, in terms of what you're up to right now, what are some things that you're doing, and how do you stay connected to the scene?
I go out and just basically go see shows, and now you can social network, which is a lot easier than what it used to be. You actually have to go out and talk to people face to face. Still a good thing, but it's also a lot easier to just message them and say, "Hey, guys want to play?" or anything like that. And I try my best to keep up with new music as much as I can, especially that's in the scene and whatever the scene is now. But I still go out, go to shows, talk to people, and that's pretty much what you got to do. So, in simple terms.
Right. And you mentioned the whole social media aspect. So in terms of like getting the word out, I know back in the 90s and 2000s and what have you, you had a lot of publications that were helping to spread the word to whether it was to interview bands or to promote shows and that sort of thing. Is that still something that you feel is ongoing on the Jacksonville scene, or do you feel more of that has become just social media?
It's mostly social media. You don't really see anybody handing out flyers and putting on people's cars anymore. I used to go out downtown and just have a big thing of flyers and I'll just put on people's cars. We got yelled at a lot, but hey, they knew your name, right? So, unfortunately, it's mostly social media these days. I mean, people got to pay to promote their show now, and I'm like, all right. I mean, I still think the flyer thing would work if you go in the right location. I mean, you
Right.
hand out your stuff and talk to people face to face. They'll come. It works. Social media just doesn't feel like personal. It's just kind of like, oh, they're playing, cool, whatever that is.
Sure.
You know?
I I think also too, just like with music, I feel like to be able to go somewhere and actually have a tangible flyer
Yeah,
is neat in itself. And are there any that you may have in your collection that are some of your prized ones?
man. When we opened up for Real Big Fish, that was really cool. Good Fortune did it at Plush. It was downtown in Arlington. Um, Trying to think. We opened for Leftover Crack. I can't find that flyer, but it was Leftover Crack and Citizen Fish, and that was one of the wildest shows I've ever played. It was awesome, like completely packed out, and there wasn't a single person not moving. So that was a wild one. I never forgot that show. It was like my top three right there. I remember, like a lot of those old punkers and gutter punks or whatever they call them, like they don't bathe, and I could smell the audience. And it's just like a punk rock show. I was like, hey, I just want to let you guys know you smell like shit. Take a bath. And so everybody's like, ah! Freaking out, yelling. I got them wild up. They love that. So,
I bet.
but I don't understand the not bathing thing with the punk rockers. It's something I never gotten into. So I always kind of get on to them about
Right.
it. Yeah, yeah,
It's
just bathe, man. Good
yeah,
music is good. Just bathe.
right.
You
Yeah.
know.
It certainly is not a bad thing.
No,
So
not at all.
well, that's
Yeah.
fantastic to hear that that you were able to kind of remember some of those in your own archive, and perhaps some may hold more value and more memory for you personally. And was there ever a show perhaps that you were going to be opening up for a band that was coming in from out of town, or maybe just a
Hmm.
show in general that it didn't happen? Maybe someone got sick, or just it didn't happen for whatever reason. Any of those types of
Yeah.
things?
In Whispers, we were going to open up for Max Cavalera from Sepultura, Soulfly, and that never happened. So we were really stoked to be a part of that, and just never came through. So that was definitely one I remember. And then Shadows Fall, that got canceled too for some reason. I think they were breaking up. But yeah, that's two of the ones I can remember. So
Right. And it's interesting to hear some of the different bands and what have you that you've been sharing because of so many of the different bands you've played in, and so many of them have a different kind of sound. You've had the
yeah,
chance to perhaps have opportunities to
yeah,
play with bands that are on fairly opposite ends of the music spectrum in some
oh
respects.
yeah, oh yeah. Um, Filled in for Green Jello one time, so that was pretty random. My friend Jeremy texted me and he's like, "Hey, do you want to?" He's friends with Bill Manspeaker from Green Jello. He's like, "Hey, do you want to play bass in Jacksonville at Rain Dogs, the Green Jello?" I was like, "Absolutely." So I went to I learned all their songs, went to the Goodwill, got like crazy outfit. I was in women's clothes and I had like a crazy blonde wig and I threw like fake flour on my face. So it was fun, man. It was like a whole different character. They had the drummer from Yngwie Malmsteen. The kid was like 19 years old, and we had two drummers, and one was John, and there was like three guitar players. There was a saxophone player, and it was Bill Manspeaker. It was just chaos, and I loved every minute of it. So I was really sick that day too. So I just played it off.
Right.
It was rough. So, but
Is
I didn't make any money doing that. It was just for the experience. It was just cool to say I did that. So.
right. And this is the same Green Jello who had the song on MTV in the 90s, A Little
Mm-hmm.
Pig, same band.
Three Little Pigs. Yep.
Right. The video was very memorable. It was like a buzzworthy
Yeah.
video for a long time. And it was
Yep.
like, what is this? Because it was different than perhaps some other stuff that was going on at that
Yeah.
time.
It's like kids could relate to it, and then adults could too.
Right.
And that song has gotten mass attention over the years. So like millions and millions of views and plays.
When you had the chance to play with them, were you on stage performing that song as well?
Oh yeah, we opened up with that song. It's like he comes out and there's like a chant says Green Jello sucks, and then he gives the audience all these like puppet masks he's made, like these giant like Fred, Betty and Flintstones, Fred, Ninja Turtles, all kinds of stuff. Puts it on he gives it to the audience members and just running on stage, whatever, just chaos. And then we go into Three Little Pigs, and then it just keeps going from there. Like shit, the song "Shit Man." They brought up this guy that was he's like a big pile of crap, and he had a toilet seat around yeah, he's running around in the pit. It was just nuts. It was chaos, dude. It didn't feel real. So I was in that band for like a brief moment. It was awesome.
I mean, it sounds like it may
Yeah.
have been a brief moment, but it was a lot that may
It
have
was great.
happened in that.
Yeah,
So,
it was great.
wow. I mean, how do you
Yeah,
top that?
I don't know. Gore maybe. Gore will top it. But Green Jello is second, I think.
Yeah.
So.
No, that's great. That's great to hear.
Yeah,
And kind of just, and I know that kind of maybe setting the bar really high, but thinking about a
yeah.
lot of the shows that you had played over the years, I want you to maybe think in terms of some of the ones that had some of the worst pits. Do any one or two shows come to mind?
And Whispers did a reunion show. Jackrabbits. It was our last show. We just put in the towel. We got a little too busy. I think two people broke their legs in the pit. Yeah. I mean, you're playing, you don't really notice it. It's just a big blur. Like you're paying attention to other things. But afterwards, I just remember this guy come out and his leg was destroyed. And I was like, what happened? Like, what? So, well, we had a lot of strobe lights on and everything. So that probably didn't help. But that was one of the most memorable. Um, and a social in Orlando with had a heart shaped box was pretty nuts. Saw a guy jump off stage and he went head first and like just sunk in the crowd with his feet sticking up. It was like a slow, and I never saw him again. So rumor has it he's still missing to this day. So I don't know. It's just memorable things, man. A lot of
Yeah,
crazy stuff has happened, so that I can remember.
that is
So, yeah,
definitely painful It sounds
Yeah,
like experience
a lot
something
of
like
a lot of painful things I've seen. So
sure. And then
yeah.
and then perhaps when you're an attendee going to a show, like were you one that would go into the pit? Would you stage dive at all, or were you kind of just a
I do.
spectator just checking it
I
out?
have. Sometimes at 40, I do. I don't stage dive anymore. My back hurts. So, um, I run into the pit sometimes. I saw my buddies in Authority Zero down in St. Augustine recently, and I was in that. It was raining the whole time. It was pretty cool. The Pie Tasters and Mephistopheles played that show too, so that was really awesome. Um, I think the worst one I ever went into was Slayer down in Orlando. So don't recommend that. I know they're
Yeah.
kind of getting back together. Just don't do it. Don't do
I laugh at that because that is my worst
it.
pit story too. Is
Oh, really? Which one
being
did you go to?
so I saw Slayer way back when in Fort Lauderdale. I
Okay.
can't remember what
Oh,
year
I
it
can
was,
imagine.
but they played at a place called the Chili Pepper, which prior had a name of a venue called the Edge, and like so many places, names change and what have you.
Yeah.
But Fear Factory opened up for them,
Awesome.
and there was a group of people in the crowd that were there before Slayer got on. It was very, I wouldn't say it was calm, but it was a little different. And as soon as Slayer came on,
Yep.
it was like a complete scene change of people.
Yeah. It's hell on earth. That's the only way I could explain it. Like as soon as the intro kicked in, like when they went on stage, the whole place is just like a giant mass. And I had to run around as soon as they kicked in. I think it was the song "God Hates Us All" and they Disciple, and I ran around Hard Rock probably 4 or 5 times. I couldn't get out. They wouldn't let me out. And I had to take down this poor guy. And when I got in my car, I had teeth marks like on my arms. So yeah, I thought I was gonna die, man. Like I was like, this is it. This is how I'm going. Like it was bad. I had to gave me really bad anxiety, but the power they have over people, man, it's
Right.
something else.
Totally. And that's an
Yeah,
experience that I
yeah,
think I think once is plenty, but
yeah. No more, never
yeah.
again. Yeah. Um, I think Kill Switch Engage opened up in Mastodon at the time. So and then I saw them with their last tour with Lamb of God and Behemoth. That was pretty cool. And another memorable pit that I refused to get in. I was sitting upstairs at Freebird when it was around in Jack's Beach, and it was a Hatebreed show, probably in 2004. And man, there's a huge balcony. It's like one of those venues that has downstairs, and it's like the wooden balcony, floats around. People were jumping off the balcony into the crowd, just landing. And it was like probably 8 to 10 people doing it. It wasn't just one time. So and they just got swallowed. It was the wildest thing I've ever seen. Agnostic Front opened, so you can only imagine how that went.
Right.
So yeah, I just stayed in the same place that whole night. I was like, nope,
I don't
no
blame
sir.
you. I
Yeah,
I don't blame you. And
yeah,
I know some perhaps some of these stories have different time periods and what have you.
yeah.
And when you had the chance to perhaps, play a lot of the shows that you did your family ever make it out to like see you do your thing and perhaps watch you perform, whether it was with any of the bands you had
Yeah.
played with over the years?
My my dad, my mom came out to my first Summer Obsession show, and they were like, "You live a wild life. This is a lot. I don't know what you're doing." Kind of. They weren't. My dad was happy. My mom was a little off kilter about it, but she supports me. So my brother came out a million times. He's seen me a lot. So
Nice. I mean, you
then,
had hopefully a lot of opportunities. I mean, to see you play at some point and
yeah,
with so many of the different bands you've played with over the years.
yeah,
So I know that one of the bands that you're in currently that I've had the chance to check out one of the songs for
mhm,
is Crash Party
yeah,
and the single Dead to Me, which very
mhm,
catchy song. When I first heard it, I'm like, this is I feel like I kind of knew the words. I only heard it
yeah. That's awesome.
I only heard it one time. So what's it been like being a part of that band? Because I know that there are some other Jax alum from some other bands. So talk
Yeah.
about that for a minute if you could.
Um. So when I departed from Julia Gulia, probably like 3 days later, uh, my buddy Jason Beffert, he said, "Hey, LP's starting a new band. Just give him a call." I texted him and said, "Hey man, I'm available," and he instantly called me back. He's like, "You're hired. It's fine. You're in." So, and then my buddy Shannon Fitz, who plays in a band called Generator, also, we all got together, started auditioning guitar players. We've had multiple guitar players. We actually switched guitar players because they travel and they have other bands. But we also kind of do the cover gig too to make, practice, make money. We get paid to practice. So they all live in St. Augustine. I live up here, so it works. So we had our buddy Aaron play guitar for a little bit. He went on tour with Johnny Craig. So he plays with him from time to time. I think he's going back out soon. And he has a band called Versatile. So he's busy. And then we had Lou Rubino, who played in bass and Paramore on the first album, I believe. And he's had several other projects. He's a producer. We recorded him and produced everything with him. So, and he plays with us from time to time. I think he's going on tour with Godsmack, doing bass tech soon. So, and then LPs from Yellow Card and 10-Foot Pole and all that stuff. And now we got our buddy Mike Cavallo. He actually lives he has like a hat company he owns, and it's Cavallo and Co. And he flies up to Canada, comes back down here, lives here too. So it's a hodgepodge, of guitar players. But yeah, we've been going that. We actually got a new song coming out soon. I think it's called Survive. I think we're sticking with that title. I don't know.
Okay.
Whatever they want to do. I just, whatever, man. Call it whatever you want. It's a title. Cool. But I think it's called Survive. We're getting that out probably within the next month, and we're gonna be putting out 2 more songs after that. We're just trying to release stuff. We're trying to find our sound too because it's still new. So we're trying to see what direction we want to go in with it. I want to be different, but it's like it's a lot of elements
to
take in. So we're trying to find that common ground, that common area.
No, that makes complete sense. And do you feel like this could be a band that perhaps does a bit more in terms of actually putting out like an EP or an album, or perhaps even doing some touring, whether it's in Florida or perhaps surrounding parts of the East Coast and what have you?
Well, yeah, we're once we get the EP out and everything, we're gonna try to do our best to get out to different states and tour. We actually hired a manager for this band, so Jason Peacock. He's very business noteworthy and been helping us out a lot. So it's just good to have that, guidance. Previous bands I were in, it was like, this guy handles it. He's the member. No matter what he says goes kind of thing. And I'm not really down with that. So
What do you think this band, you feel like you went that route? What is it about this project that you feel now you're kind of doing more of that when it comes to hiring a manager?
Just we get more of a connection. It's less stress. We're actually all friends. So, like when you get caught in the business sometimes, there's going to be disagreements and you don't talk for a while, unfortunately. But we're all friends here. We always work through everything. We talk about what needs to be done. We actually have meetings with our manager here and there, and, we're very organized. So we're getting there. We're just getting the kinks out, So, but overall, I think it will be, it'll do pretty well over time.
It's a strong start, no doubt about it. I mean, that song is very catchy. I'm not entirely sure what the reaction's been from people have come to see the band or friends or what have you. But I remember when I first heard it, I was like, okay, this is
awesome, man. Thank you.
Very catchy tune. So
appreciate that.
Excited.
It's we're getting more out there, so hopefully it catches on a little more. I mean, we've had it out for a month and it's almost 8,000 plays for a first song, so I'm not too mad about that. That's a pretty good start.
Not bad at all.
Yeah.
Pretty solid. So and there's no label or anything like that, right? You're just social media and what have you. Yeah.
Everything. Doing everything on our own right now.
Right.
So we'll see what happens. So
Very cool. Yeah. Well, I wish you the best of luck with that. And
thanks, man.
And I want you to also kind of think about too, when you're not playing music, right? You're not doing something in that arena. What else are you up to, Mark? Where else can people kind of?
I am a big video game collector. I've been playing video games since the old Nintendo, so never stopped. I know too much about it, and it's probably not the most interesting conversation to most or people. So, um, big horror fan, big Star Wars fan. I read, big H.P. Lovecraft fan. Uh, play drums, play guitar. I try to work out as much as I can. At 40, I'm busy. Um, I mean, yeah.
Do you find that some of your hobbies and interests make it into your music too?
So, yeah, sometimes. Um, I carry portable video games with me everywhere that I read. So, and I cook a lot too at
Nice.
home. I got the big green egg now. That's apparently like the Mac Daddy of the grills, so they say. But been really getting into the smoking meats thing. That's a whole nother art.
There you go. You see,
Yeah,
if I was talking to like 16-year-old Mark, he wouldn't have said that.
not at all.
But 40-year-old Mark, he's down with talking about cooking.
Yeah, down with cooking. I'm down with chilling. Anything to keep myself busy.
There you go.
You know,
Very
so
cool.
yeah,
Well,
yeah, man.
it's been great getting a chance to chat with you, Mark, and
For sure, you too. Absolutely.
I'm so glad we had a chance to unpack a lot of your contributions to the Jack scene and all the things that you've done
Yeah,
and so many of the bands. And I know we could probably sit here for a month and probably
yeah,
still have more to talk about in terms of all the
yeah.
things that you've done. But I appreciate what you've shared and just talking about your contributions and everything you've done in the scene. So it's been great talking with you.
Definitely, definitely. You too, man. I appreciate you having me. Very cool.
Absolutely. So, as we get ready to kind of close things out, I would love to give you the last word. Any final comments or thoughts you'd like to share to fans and supporters alike?
Yeah.
Take us home.
Um, all I can say is, if you're not happy with your current job or your life, take control of it. Take that leap of faith. You know, work really hard towards it. Don't sleep. Do what you have to do to be happy, and that's priceless. Being your own boss is extremely rewarding, but extremely busy, but it's worth it. So if you're thinking about doing something, just go do it. At least you can say you tried. So at least you can say you did that. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You did it. So, and I appreciate everybody listening and supporting me over the years and whatever I've been doing. So it's been a lot of projects to keep up with, and I don't think a lot of people can keep up with it, but it's okay. And I appreciate everybody's support, and I appreciate you having me here today. So.